about humility. But because status breeds complacency, Paul commands the Colossians to clothe themselves with compassion, with kindness, with humility, with gentleness and patience. Can you see that even from last week, we are once again in part of the fruit of the Spirit, part of the reason I left the fruit of the Spirit sign up on the wall. God has brought us to a place where we need to remember this fruit over these last weeks. See, in God's love, we are called to holiness, but we are called to one another's too. And here we are told to bear with one another. You know what bear with means, don't you? It's to support, to lift up, to carry burdens. But Paul also calls us through this scripture to forgive one another. Paul is very explicit. If you hold something against someone, forgive them as the Lord forgave you. Now, our world says a lot of things about forgiveness in various ways. People drop words like, I'm sorry, I've done something wrong, I apologize if you feel. There's lots of ways people politely say, I've done something that needs forgiveness. But forgiveness is so much more than the way the world goes and acts. Now, I'm reminded of something from my childhood, perhaps from your childhood. Paul pushes forgiveness in the Christian community two ways and pushes us further than our world tends to be. You know, first of all, we're seen as a body, and that means when we're called to forgive one another, this doesn't just mean our friends, the ones we like, this means all. So when we have stuff that's gone wrong between us, we need to work out forgiveness practically. And secondly, forgiveness here is a challenge because we are told to forgive one another as Christ forgives us. I'm not going to ask for hands in the air, but I think if I did, there would be a lot. As children, I suspect lots of you, when you did something wrong, were told, you've been naughty, go to your room and think about what you did. Does that resonate with a few of you? Go to your room and think about your behavior. Even one here going, yeah, they used to do that to me, or they still do. I'm really sorry if that's the case. But you know what? Who went to their room and thought about what they did wrong? Not me. I went to my room and played with my toys. I didn't have iPads or PS5s or, you know, anything like that, or TVs. But I tell you what, when I went to my room, I was just glad I got out of there without being clapped one by my grandma, because she used to hit first and ask questions never. And some of you can relate to that as well. Forgive one another as Christ forgave you. See, quite often we got removed in those situations from our parents. Sometimes parents say it because they're pretty angry at the time and they need a minute just to woo-saw and just calm. But think about this. And if you've done this as a parent, then I'm not trying to condemn you. Think about doing something wrong and then being told by the person that loves you to go away from them. Imagine if Christ forgave us and now said, go away. This scripture challenges us. Forgive one another as Christ forgave you. Christ forgave us and then made his home with us, right up among us by his Spirit. As we come to this table today, this one another is profoundly challenging, because sometimes even in the Christian community, we forgive someone and then in a very polite Christian way, keep away from them for the rest of our known lives. It's true, isn't it? It's not how Christ forgave us. I forgive you, Michael. I'm out of here. I'm looking at Michael not because he's been bad, but just because I saw him. But you understand that. Forgive one another as Christ forgave us. And so forgiveness means that presence has to be retained. And that's challenging. So as we come to this table today, I'm not going to say any more other than we're told to examine ourselves before these elements. Examine yourself. Talk to God and say, do I need to deal with things with people in my family? Have I not forgiven one another the way you forgave me, Lord? Because you know what? There is no shame, as Paul teaches, if there's a problem on one occasion, to let these elements pass. Your eternal warranty will not expire if you let these elements pass. In fact, you will do better because you are not heaping judgment on yourself. So if there's a problem that you have and you've examined that before God and you say, actually, God, there's someone I've got to talk to, let these elements pass. Tell you what, if you have to do that this morning, they'll be left at the end. Your element won't get taken. It won't get thrown away. You can still share communion. But we are told to soberly examine ourselves because we take elements here which are not bread and wine. Yes, they don't become Jesus' body, as transubstantiation says, but they represent his sacrifice. You know, this food on this table is spiritual, and this represents something to us, precious, doesn't it? It represents something in heaven as well. It represents what Jesus is doing. So let us therefore bear with one another and forgive one another as Jesus does with us. We're going to have a minute of quiet. And after that minute, our serving deacons this morning, John and Simon, are going to come forward and we're going to share these elements.